Hello, and she doesn't even have a Sega. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Jurassic Park month, and this week we are talking the 1997 film, The Lost World. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host who was once considered extinct, Andrew Williams. Are you ready for this one, Andrew?
Extinct, Chris? Who was telling you that?
It was, what was the saying? Rumors of your demise have been greatly exaggerated, but I'm glad to have you with us here today, Andrew. Talking about dinosaurs. You excited for this one? This week, this month, these movies?
Yes. I love dinosaurs, man. We have discussed this. I believe we discussed this during one of our Christmas episodes where we talked about dinosaurs for a minute, hyping up this month. But I am stoked because dinosaurs are awesome. I am still a huge fan. I go to museums and look at dinosaurs all the time. And so it's been a while, though, since I've gone back to some of these Jurassic Park movies. Even with the new ones that have kind of been coming out, I haven't quite gone back to some of these earlier ones. So I'm excited to go back and see if maybe my brain is misremembering things a little bit.
I'm excited to revisit most of these, and some of them this month I'll be watching for the first time. So every episode in the month of January is going to be on a Jurassic Park sequel. We're covering all 5 sequels in this franchise. I, as the time of this recording, have seen all the way up through Jurassic World. I saw that in theaters. It's the one time I've seen it. I did not see the 2 movies that came after that. So when we get to that point of the month, I'll be watching those movies for the first time. But yeah, to your point though, like this movie, The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3, I can't tell you the last time I watched it. At least 20 years, easy. And it's... Yeah, this one in particular, The Lost World, some of my perceptions I think have definitely changed over time. I'm happy to dive in with our hashtag PP mindset and really dig into everything that's working here because I think there's a lot to like here. And you know, the whole point, the whole reason we have this podcast is because most conversations about The Lost World, they're short and sweet. Oh, it's not as good as the original. Oh, they know what they're doing. A lot of negative stuff. You've heard it, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. People don't dive into this one and talk about some of the specifics and the scenes and what actually works there. And I think there's plenty to jump into. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. Obviously, you know, the premise of our show covering poorly received movies, we're not going to do an episode on the original Jurassic Park. It is, by all accounts, pretty well received. I actually didn't realize this until researching this movie that at the time of its release, it was the highest grossing film of all time. I really didn't. I knew it was a big hit, but my God, that was a big movie. And it's, by all accounts, what can you say about Jurassic Park? One of the best action movies ever made, one of Spielberg's best movies, the dinosaur movie. I don't think that's ever going to change. Totally holds up. You know, 30 years later, it's a perfect movie. It's wonderful.
It is. I actually saw a double feature of it with the latest Jurassic World Dominion. AMC did a double feature of Jurassic Park with Jurassic World Dominion. So I felt like I was missing a lot of information watching just those two. Feels like a lot happened in between. And it was unbelievable. You watch that on the big screen, and like you said, even the effects, very little of it feels dated, which is pretty impressive given the limits at the time, and especially given that Jurassic Park at the time it was made only cost $63 million to make a movie. I mean, crazy. Jurassic World Dominion, by comparison, cost like $185 million, and you know we'll talk more about that one later. But seeing it on the big screen in 2022, and just seeing how well it holds up was just it's thrilling, you know, and it just reminds you that the movie is awesome and that dinosaurs are the coolest thing. And you definitely realize though that there's so many things about dinosaurs though that people think are true because of Jurassic Park. Like it's become this like whether the information is actually true or not, Jurassic Park has now become like so many people's like basis for dinosaurs, to the point that, there was this attempt to be as accurate as possible, but in the ensuing years, we found out more things about dinosaurs, and people don't even know, because Jurassic Park is like how they view dinosaurs in their head. And so it's just really got that cultural awareness and that cultural identification that just still persists to this day.
Yeah, totally. Whenever you think of dinosaurs, when you picture dinosaurs, you're picturing animatronics and CGI that you saw in Jurassic Park. These are like the definitive looks of dinosaurs, when obviously they're as accurate as can be, but there's a lot of guesswork happening. I mean, these aren't
right.
exactly what they must have looked like however many millions of years ago, but in all of our minds and the collective pop culture conscious, yes, Steven Spielberg's dinosaurs are the dinosaurs. Real quick, the original Jurassic Park, how many people would agree that Jeff Goldblum is your Mark Strong Award winner and the best scene is the raptors in the kitchen?
I think those would be pretty common. I think there's a few you could argue for one or two other Mark Strongs. I wouldn't be shocked. Like, I think I wouldn't be horribly shocked if someone actually said Samuel L. Jackson was their Mark Strong, just because of his quips.
His cigarette work?
His cigarette work is off the charts in that movie.
Micro Mike Strong Award to that cigarette.
That cigarette. That cigarette hanging on, despite the fact there's like a millimeter of tobacco left on that filter. But like, even Wayne Knight in that movie, like I if somebody said it was Wayne Knight, I wouldn't be like, that's wrong. Like, I mean, the way he's so sniveling and annoying and just undermining that entire movie. But Jeff Goldblum's performance from that movie, like, there's a Funko Pop of like him laying back with his shirt open. Like, there's no doubt that, that performance,
the true definition of iconic. There's a Funko Pop,
right? There's a Funko Pop of it. And I mean, honestly, I mean, you're maybe even your easiest identifier is that the sequel makes him the main character. And you can't doubt that that's in part due to the fact that he was so popular in the original. Yet in the original, he's definitely, I would say, one of the secondary protagonists. I wouldn't say he's the lead of that movie. I mean, it's an ensemble, but there's other characters that are definitely given more prominence. But I think I think those two scenes are pretty easy as, I mean, I don't know. I think the T-Rex attack could arguably also qualify, like
that,
the T-Rex attack on the car.
That probably would be my favorite scene, the first T-Rex attack in the rain at night. That one's the most iconic.
With the cars and everything.
Still thrilling.
Well, and the fact that like you said, it's still thrilling today, and it's literally a 1993 movie where a T-Rex attacks a car and chucks it over the side of a rail. And it's like, the fact you can make that then and have it still hold up now and not really have people go, oh, this looks so dated, that alone speaks to it. And I think the T-Rex would edge out the Raptors for me, if only because I think there are a few more Raptor sequences where it does break a little bit for me, and the CG kind of shines through a little bit more than it does in that T-Rex scene. But it's all quibbles. It's all minor. It's so well done for the time, and it still holds up today. So
I'm still scared to use a wooden outhouse outside during the rain.
At a zoo, especially. Who knows what's out there? When you gotta go, you gotta go. But still,
original, bona fide classic. We all know that. I'm kind of curious. What are your favorite scenes or performances from that first movie? Does it line up? Does it not? You can let us know on social media in our Discord. But right now, it's time to talk about the first sequel that was made to that movie, The Lost World: Jurassic Park. Released May 23rd of 1997, made on a budget of $73 million, and at the box office, it brings in $618 million. Quite a lot of dough. However, critics are a bit split on it. Split to negative, it holds just a 54% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. Fans were pretty disappointed at the time. I do remember a pretty negative backlash isn't the right word, but negative reception amongst fans, and that really never let up. To my knowledge, there hasn't really been much revisiting and changing of feelings on this movie, and to this day, it holds a 51% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, lower than the critics. So, safe to say, all around, just not super well received. Great box office, but it kind of ends there.
Yeah, it's the second highest grossing film of the year, if only because this little indie picture called Titanic also came out that year.
A few people saw that movie, yeah.
Yeah, a few.
Dude, did you see Titanic's box office, by the way? If you haven't looked it up, I want you to guess. But if you've already looked at it, wow. Have you seen it? Do you know what
I
the
mean, I
Titanic's
remember.
box
I mean,
office?
I know it was the first movie to ever hit $1 billion, but it's at like what? It's like it's not far off from $2 billion now, is it? Like 1.7, 1.8, something like
Okay,
that.
final answer?
Yeah, let's go 1.8.
$2.2 billion in 1997. I know there's re-releases in 3D and stuff, but the bulk of it comes from that original release. Over
That's
$2
nuts.
billion. That's nuts, man. I remember MCU movies started finally crossing $1 billion, and like that's the benchmark now for like blowing it out of the water. And that's only half of what Titanic made. Crazy how big that movie was.
Yeah, it's that James Cameron. He well, and then Avatar does he his highest grossing film is beaten by his own movie. Like, 11 years later or 12 years later. And
well, funny enough, that's what Steven Spielberg did. E.T. was the highest grossing film until Jurassic Park.
Good for you guys. It's weird to think about just because, again, I see, you see how much money this movie made, and it's just weird to think that at a time that was the second highest grossing film of the year. But it's also, I look at the production for Lost World was, I think, $73 million. But apparently the marketing budget was upwards of like $250 million.
Yeah,
so
that
the
was
marketing
everywhere.
budget is almost 4 times the cost of the actual film. And that's just it's so weird to think about. But yeah, audiences definitely down the middle. I think the effects were definitely praised. I think people were still really impressed with how it looked. But I think really it just comes down to the story being told on screen. I think people just definitely got the impression this felt like this feels backhanded, but just a sequel for the sake of a sequel. The first one made a ton of money, better make another one. And even though you had Michael Crichton write a book, and then Steven Spielberg and David Koepp did the script, Steven Spielberg directed it, like you just couldn't get that lightning back in the bottle. Like Jurassic Park is just such a combination of things that it just can't come together as well for this one. But maybe that opinion is wrong. No.
You mentioned Michael Crichton's book. Quick note about the Lost World book is that, like you said, he was pressured or asked to write it after the success of the film. So he writes it essentially as a sequel to the movie, because the original Jurassic Park book, they changed quite a lot for the movie adaptation. Characters, entire characterization, personality are changed. Who lives and dies change. A lot of the violence is taken out. It becomes much more of a family feature, family story. But a lot has changed. So whenever he writes that sequel, it's got to make sense. They know that they want to make a movie out of the book that he's writing. So the book is essentially a sequel to the movie, which it's so weird that they were adamant about him writing a book so that they could base a movie off of it, because they changed so much in that original. I don't know why they didn't feel like they could just make a sequel without Michael Crichton, but I guess, certainly
And then they
good
would,
for Michael
many
Crichton
times.
getting the royalties. Yeah, eventually they would. But for this first one, they wanted to keep him involved, I guess, as much as possible. So respect for that. But let's take a look at the rest of the creative team. As you mentioned, the movie is written by David Koepp, returning from his adaptation of the first movie. A few other credits that this man has under his belt: Death Becomes Her, the quirky little comedy from the early 90s that I really enjoy. Mission Impossible launches my favorite film franchise ever. And he's even sat in the director's chair a few times. He's the writer-director of Stir of Echoes, Secret Window, and Premium Rush, 3 movies that I would say are supremely underrated. I enjoy all of those quite a bit.
Well, we've talked about David Koepp before. He's an alum of the show. Obviously, having written a little film called The Shadow. So we've definitely gushed about the work that he's done before. I mean, he's a writer on David Fincher's Panic Room, the original Spider-Man. Just a who's who. And he's even he may have a final script credit on Indiana Jones 5. We'll see. He wrote some earlier drafts. We're not sure if his drafts will, or if his credits will remain in the final film. But, just tons and tons of credits. He's worked with every single major director available for the most part. He's a who's who. He technically co-writes that first movie with Michael Crichton, because Michael Crichton himself wrote earlier drafts of the film. Michael Crichton himself actually has directed some films. I don't know if anybody actually knew that or not. He actually directed 6 movies, 7, yeah, a few, including the original Westworld, which became the television show of the same name. But Michael Crichton writes and directs that original film. So I love Michael Crichton, folks, if you haven't noticed. I'm a huge fan of everything that he's done, and it was really, really cool to see him, get this huge success with these Jurassic Park movies. But also, I guess he got left at Disney World as a child or something, because something about futuristic theme parks going wrong just recurs a few too many times throughout his career for me to think it's just a coincidence. But yeah, so him and David Koepp write that first one together. And then for this one, again, oddly, Michael Crichton does not write any of the film scripts. He's David Koepp alone. So it's even stranger that you wanted him to write a sequel novel. And then I think the film was announced like 2 months after the book was released. And then he doesn't assist in writing the film. Also, just want to shout out the covers to Jurassic Park and The Lost World are both by a gentleman named Chip Kidd, who is a very good graphic designer. And those are they're iconic. Just those iconic Tyrannosaurus skeletons, the black on white background, just looks really cool. So, but yeah, David Koepp coming to bat here. Like you said, he's got a very good Premium Rush. I really do want to call out to people that you should really, really watch that. Great lead performance by Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Fantastic villainous performance by Michael Shannon.
The greatest actor of all time.
I just watched their Christmas classic last night, the night before, which
they are both in that too. That's fun.
They are. Michael Shannon might be my Mark Strong of that movie just because of how ridiculous his character is.
I love that character.
Yeah. So definitely check out some other of David Koepp's things. But yeah, he comes in here to get sole writing credit on The Lost World Jurassic Park.
And of course, the movie is directed by Steven Spielberg, not an alum of the show. It's the first time we've had a chance to talk about Steven Spielberg. I don't think he's really even come up in parallel discussions or anything, but there's obviously nothing we can sit here and say about Steven Spielberg that hasn't already been said. In fact, I would argue that Steven Spielberg is the most, when it comes to the world of filmmaking, is the most influential living person around today. What do you think, Andrew? That's not too hot of a take, is it?
Living, adding living to the qualifiers there, I think makes it very important. But especially to the world of film, just because you think about, we had a discussion in our Discord that was talking about kids on bikes movies, and there's so many Steven Spielberg movies that are part of that. Like you think about E.T. as being like a kids on bikes movie, stuff like that. That just kind of feel of the '80s. That he created, and just then you just think about the blockbusters he's done: Indiana Jones, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Jaw. I mean, this dude, like, his second theatrical film is Jaws. Like the dude the dude almost Orson Welles himself. Like, and don't get me wrong, his first movie is Sugarland Express, which is that's not terribly reviewed, and it's pretty good. But it's Jaws. And then his next movie is immediately Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And it's just like, bruh, like, save some for the rest of us. Like, just coming out of the gate. I think it was 1941, a little underrated. That's a Steven Spielberg directed movie written by Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, who would later write Back to the Future. But, and then it's Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Like, the dude just starts firing and just doesn't stop. And
what I find most fascinating about Steven Spielberg is there's not it's probably most known for the kind of like family-friendly adventure film, safe enough to say. But Jaws doesn't fit that category. And that's one of his most famous movies. He doesn't have like a sandbox that he stays in. He's all over the place, and he knocks it out of the park in almost every genre he attempts. And you really can't say that about a lot of high-profile directors, right? Like, I really like Christopher Nolan movies. They all feel like Christopher Nolan movies. Steven Spielberg movies do not all feel like they're cut from the same cloth. He's got certain
Absolutely
filmmaking
not.
techniques and signatures you see pop up, but otherwise, I mean, The Lost World Jurassic Park is nothing like The Color Purple, right?
Which is nothing like Saving Private Ryan, which is
Exactly.
nothing like Munich, which is nothing like, war. Like he doesn't stay in one genre. He doesn't stay in one time period. Like he goes anywhere he wants. And there's a pretty great example of almost every single genre he's done where he absolutely crushes it. Like
the most Steven Spielberg thing ever is that Jurassic Park, the highest grossing movie of all time, was released the same year as Schindler's List, one of his most critically acclaimed movies and one of the most critically acclaimed movies of all time, the definitive Holocaust movie. Same man, same director, released the same year. Incredible.
And then the same year he releases Lost World Jurassic Park, he also releases Amistad. So something he's like, if I'm releasing my dinosaur movie, I also have to release my historical drama about the mass genocide of a people. And then he follows up and then the next year after Lost World is Saving Private Ryan. And so just that sample size alone of Jurassic Park, Schindler's List, Lost World, Amistad, Saving Private Ryan, it's like that's how he spends the 90s. It's pretty crazy to think about. He does start the 90s off with Hook, but maybe one day we'll talk about Hook here, so I won't go too heavily into it. But yeah, I mean he's Steven Spielberg, and it's actually surprising to see how many instances he has where he releases two movies in the same year, because it happens a couple of times where he actually releases two movies in a year, and that's just so unheard of now. Like even War of the Worlds and Munich are in the same year. Minority Report and Catch Me If You Can are in the same year. And don't get me wrong, you can kind of see a vibe of usually one of them is a more effects heavy affair, and the other one is definitely a little bit more grounded. So, while the first one's still in post, he basically goes out and shoots a whole nother movie and then comes back. But it's pretty wild to think about and see that he's just able to keep doing that. Even as recently as 2011, like he did Tintin and Warhorse in the same year. And that's, he's Steven Spielberg by that point. He doesn't have to do that, but he wants to. So props to him.
Props to Steven Spielberg. Well deserved. And I think now it's time we jump into this movie. We cross that threshold where it's all #positivity podcast. Here on out, all of the best parts and our favorite scenes of The Lost World Jurassic Park. You ready, Andrew?
Yes.
Four years after Jurassic Park was shut down, dinosaur life on the island has thrived. After a young girl is attacked on the island's beach, the man behind the company that created the dinosaurs, Dr. John Hammond, assembles a team to document the dinosaur ecosystems in the hopes that the world will agree the island is worthy of conservation efforts. Shortly after the arrival of this team, which consists of Jurassic Park survivor Ian Malcolm and paleontologist Sarah Harding, among others, a much larger team arrives on the island, led by Peter Ludlow, Dr. Hammond's nephew. Their goal is to capture dinosaurs for a new park in San Diego. Soon, everyone's lives are in danger as equipment and weapons are destroyed and the humans find themselves outnumbered by the prehistoric predators. The survivors of each group band together to escape, along with a captured T-Rex. When the dinosaur arrives at the mainland, it manages to escape for one last rampage. Andrew, we talked about that $250 million advertising campaign. I remember this movie being hyped, being everywhere, fast food tie-ins, the whole 9 yards, right?
Yep.
My biggest takeaway from all of the advertising and stuff was a T-Rex loose on the city. I feel like that was like the selling point of this movie. And then you go to watch it and it's really not about that. at
It's like the
all.
last 10 minutes.
It technically happens at the end, but it's so divorced from the rest of the movie that I got to think some of the negative comments and criticism, especially from audiences, was kind of felt like there might have been a bait and switch there, you know?
I think you're not wrong. I definitely remember, like, I feel like that 76 ball rolling past Jeff Goldblum's car. I feel like I saw that a lot in like promotional or just even like maybe gas station commercials back in the day. Like, I feel like that was used a lot. It's like, oh, it's a 76 ball. It's like, yeah, but it means your gas station has been destroyed by a dinosaur. Maybe don't hype that up.
You think the dinosaur is mad? Like, you're selling my liquid bones.
Those were my friends, you jerks. But no, it's interesting because, again, hearing the plot out loud, and when I did rewatch this several years ago, I realized that the plot of this movie is basically King Kong. Like, it's the same general concept, ultimately.
Oh, yeah.
Of, you know, we're going to go capture these animals, but T-Rex obviously being the stand-in in a lot of ways. But, you know, as with several versions of King Kong, most of that movie is on the island trying to get him. And then in Peter Jackson's version, he'd just have him fight a T-Rex because it's dope. But
he fights a T-Rex in the original, right? I'm pretty sure in the first movie he does. Yeah,
he does. Yeah. I haven't rewatched the original in a long time. But
so the Lost World is basically if King Kong didn't exist and they had to settle for the T-Rex and bring him
yeah,
home.
Basically. Essentially, you know. Well, there's no giant monkeys. I guess we'll get the dinosaur instead. But like, I feel like, you know, it's the same, at least as far as Ludlow's plot. That's, you know, they're going to this island to create a theme park, but T-Rex is obviously the attraction. And then obviously it all goes terribly wrong, and King Kong / T-Rex rampages through the city they were attempting. In this case, it's San Diego, not New York City. But I just had that, like, it hit me and it's never left, where I'm just like, oh, this is just King Kong, basically. Which, you know, it's a way to switch it up a little bit, because by and large, our main plot is hitting a lot of the same notes as Jurassic Park. You know, we're at the island, the dinosaurs are back. Things obviously go wrong. Turns out that we can't trust these things. Turns out biology is unpredictable. Life finds a way, as it were. But they do throw in that bit at the end. But like you said, you feel like that was a large part of the messaging of just, oh, dinosaurs rampaging through the city. And then, like you said, it just doesn't happen, really. It's the last, like, I'm watching it and I'm like, we're getting pretty close to the end of this runtime. When does this happen? And it's literally like 5 or 6 minutes of screen time at the end of the day.
We're going to talk about all of the scenes, including that last rampage, of course. But the first thing we got to do is talk about this cast, starting with our favorite performance, as we always do, with the high point and the best casting. Every episode, we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty, that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, why don't you go ahead and kick us off here? Who is getting your Mark Strong Award for The Lost World?
Obviously, we didn't do an episode on the first Jurassic Park, so this won't make him a two-time winner. But I got to go straight to the top. Got to give it to our boy Jeff Goldblum as Dr. Ian Malcolm. Are pretty much one of our few returning cast members from the original film, outside Richard Attenborough and then Joe Maslow and Ariana Richards in a blink and you'll miss it type cameo. But yeah, so he's, you know, like I said, I mentioned it earlier. I don't think it's any coincidence that after the success of the first Jurassic Park, and specifically the reception towards Jeff Goldblum's character, there was a desire to put Ian Malcolm front and center for the sequel. Now this, I'm not trying to spoil Jurassic Park, the book. This isn't a huge spoiler for the movie, but in the book of Jurassic Park, Ian Malcolm does not survive. You know, he gets attacked by the T-Rex. He is found, but he ultimately succumbs to his injuries. I'm pretty sure, like, off page. I think you get told he died. Like, I don't even think you, like, see him die. And so that was actually one of the biggest changes in the movie, is they made it a point that he survives. But when Michael Crichton writes the sequel novel, you mentioned earlier that, he had to write a novel essentially. It kind of had to act as both. Like, it didn't just have to sort of be a sequel to the book. It kind of sort of had to be a sequel to the movie. And that essentially was a retcon on the first page that rumors of Ian Malcolm's demise were greatly exaggerated. So for the book, he is put front and center. And the plot of this is loosely based off of it. Like, overall, there's definitely similar DNA, but it actually is a situation where there's a lot of the climax of the book and the film are very different. I don't believe the book takes them back to the mainland. I don't believe any of that happened. But either way, I think it was definitely a deliberate decision to put Jeff Goldblum front and center in this movie, and you can definitely see why. There are people who feel his characterization is very different here, but I think you could definitely chalk that up to probably some added cynicism in the aftermath of Jurassic Park. I mean, they kind of really brush over it in the first 4 minutes of this movie, but essentially they imply that his entire reputation is ruined because InGen has basically smeared him in the press. They tell everyone that he lied about what happened on Isla Sorna or Isla Nublar, and he basically has this deep hatred of InGen and what they've done to him in his career. And so I think making the character more cynical tracks with what he's been through. They just really, they really charge through that information to kind of get us to the island as quick as possible. Because we get back to the island real fast in this movie. We are charging through the plot points to get over here. And but there's a charisma, and there's a you can't stop watching Jeff Goldblum as the character, and you are drawn to his performance. I think he's got the great balance. Obviously, he's the one that's been through all this before, and he's the one that keeps I hate saying "I told you so" because everything keeps going wrong. But it's Jeff Goldblum, and he was an on-screen legend to a degree before this, but obviously, I think this movie is a huge part of his lasting cultural impact. I think his role as Ian Malcolm is definitely a huge part of his current status. And I think he's doing a great job here with what's being asked of him. I think he's up to the task, and he is making it as memorable as possible.
I mean, Jeff Goldblum is great. One of just the most unique movie stars I can honestly think of. And his mannerisms and speech patterns, I mean, we know all of his little charismatic tics that we've all grown accustomed to over the years. Yeah, I think most people would agree an actor's best tool is their face and their expressions and what they do with it. And then some actors right behind that have their voice, or Tom Cruise has his run. They've got some other iconic things, but Jeff Goldblum he's got his face, he's got his voice, he's also got his hands. He's got these giant hands that are always acting along with him. Yes. And and of course you and I are both acting with our hands right now as we record this podcast, and no one can see our spot on Jeff Goldblum hand impression, but it's very good. But I agree that he just naturally has this charisma. The man's a movie star, and oddly, the 90s made him an action movie star. You don't think of that persona. The Fly, one of his defining performances. Yeah, perfect casting. Jeff Goldblum as a scientist that kind of goes mad. I buy it. But Independence Day, where he's also a scientist, but again, it's an action movie and he's doing action stuff alongside Will Smith. And then the Jurassic Park films, he's just a bona fide action star at this point. It's wild. But I can't take away anything you're saying about Jeff Goldblum and his charisma, and he's just great in everything that he's in.
Yep.
I'm gonna push back a little bit. I mean, I agree with what you're saying. His characterization here is a little bit different than the first one, but I think it's the opposite. I think he's less cynical in this movie. In the first movie, his his iconic, you slapped it on a lunchbox and before you even knew what you had, blah 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 blah. He's a pessimist throughout, right? And he's always worried about the dangers. in this movie, in the beginning, he's very much like that. Very, again, you're crazy for going back to the island. How dare you ask me to go back? And he goes against his better judgment because his girlfriend is there. But once he's there, he kind of just rolls along with everything. And he's making jokes along with everyone else. There's a lot of humor in this movie. There's a lot of like straight up jokes in the face of danger. A little strange, but he joins right along with everyone else as far as like making those jokes and joining along with the action. And I think he kind of comes around, which is weird for me to see Ian Malcolm do in the second movie. But that's not to say it's not a great performance. It's still Jeff Goldblum. It's still great. Andrew, it's a great pick, but I am going somewhere else with my Mark Strong Award. I have to give it to Julianne Moore as Dr. Sarah Harding. One thing I really love about the Jurassic Park franchise is it has to be responsible for so many kids growing up and going into various fields of science as a career, whether it's paleontology or biology or otherwise. The series made like not action stars, but they made the job like prestigious. You know, it's like there's kids dressing up as cowboys, as astronauts. That's kind of always been a thing. And then like Jurassic Park is like in paleontologists, like studying dinosaurs is cool. Even though like the reality of that job is studying bones or working in a museum or whatever. Obviously you're not literally around live dinosaurs. It still just made it cool to like be a nerd about dinosaurs. And I think that is... I don't think the movie set out to do that, but I think it's a very positive side effect. And Julianne Moore as Dr. Harding is filling that role here. That Sam Neill and Laura Dern did in that first one. They're just super nerdy about, living dinosaurs. They get to see what they're actually like and what's their habitat and how do they treat their young and all that nerdy stuff. They get really excited about it. And it's like... And they don't get made fun of for it. Like, it's cool. And Julianne Moore is doing that here. She's excited and thrilled to be taking these photographs and confirming theories. And that's what's driving her passion for her job as a behavioral paleontologist is the driving force. And even I'm looking at the Wikipedia page of like the characters, and Dr. Ian Malcolm is described as a mathematician and chaos theorist. Andrew, what is that? These aren't jobs. These aren't real things, but I love that.
I don't mean to be rude. A mathematician very much is a job. That's a real thing.
Andrew, that's ridiculous. You can't get paid to do math. Get out of here.
Nobody gets paid to do math. That's ridiculous.
But as the leads of the action movie is what I think makes it special and cool. And so I think it's like just an iconic part of the franchise, the person that's a nerd about dinosaurs. And I love Julianne Moore in that role. I love Julianne Moore in general. I think she's a fascinating actor. She just kind of bounces around between like high profile, big budget movies and super indie movies and low budget movies and just whatever calls to her at that time. And her career and filmography is fascinating because of that. She does show up in what I have previously called one of my favorite movies of all time, I'm Not There, as essentially Joan Baez, but they changed her name. But she's very good at filling that role. I love her anytime she pops up. Everything she's in, The Lost World included. That's why she is my Mark Strong Award winner.
Can't disagree with this one. It's a great performance. It was definitely one of the other ones that stood out to me. These are kind of really Ian Malcolm and Sarah Harding are kind of your main characters here. They're some of the only characters that really get any development or any attention in a lot of ways. Everybody else is kind of just filling a very kind of specific role. That's not to say they're not doing a good job, but the meat of the development or characterization is given to Ian and Sarah. And yeah, like you said, she's sitting in this role of kind of filling in the dual role of Sam Neill and Laura Dern here. And she does a good job at it. Like I said, she's the one that's like, I can prove that, the prevailing theory at the time is that T-Rex abandoned its young as soon as possible. And she's like, I can prove that's wrong. And she's so interested in just the minutia of the dinosaurs and their behavior and how they act. And it's cool. Like you said, it's cool to be a dinosaur nerd. And The enthusiasm she has for it all shines through. She's not like, it feels like she actually is interested and wants to do all these things. It all works. So, yeah, definitely not a mathematician and chaos theorist. But chaos theory is such a strange thing. Do you know what chaos theory is, Chris? Do you remember Jurassic Park enough to know what chaos theory is?
Yeah, it's whenever like rain hits your knuckles and you're like, I don't know which way it's gonna go.
Yeah.
That's it,
That's
right?
exactly what it is. The idea of chaos theory is basically just that within a series of seemingly random systems, there is still patterns. Basically, within chaos, there is still an underlying, there are still trends and patterns that you can follow. That's a very, very simplified version of it. Yeah, it's just such a strange approach. I think that just flew over people's heads for Jurassic Park. I really think it did. Where like even his explanations of it, just like you said, that's most people's chaos theory is like, yeah, you don't know which way the water's going to go. That's what it is, and that's not wrong. It's not inherently wrong. It's just a very simplified version of it. But also Julianne Moore plays off Jeff Goldblum really well. They have a really good chemistry. I think it comes through a lot. So I can't at all disagree with your choice here, even though I did. But I think it's a great performance.
This movie has got a few stand-up performances, as you were saying. I think another one is Pete Postlethwaite as Roland Timbo, who is a big game hunter. He's leading the crew that's there to capture the dinosaurs. And I talk about charisma, talk about presence. I mean, the team that comes to capture the dinosaurs is a huge team. We're not going to go through every single one of those characters because there's just so many of them, and most of them are there to be dino food. But he stands out amongst the crowd with his commanding presence, and I am captivated every time that he is talking and in charge, and like I'm listening, and I would be extremely intimidated by this gentleman in real life, this character. And it makes a lot of sense. You know, that first movie, of course, there wasn't amongst the team brought to the island. There's not going to be a big game hunter. But with the story of Jurassic Park moving forward, it makes sense to get these type of hunters involved with the stories. I think it's a natural way to go with the characters you're going to get involved. And I think this is perfect casting for that type of character. I like how he totally doesn't respect Heyman's nephew that's in charge. And he's like, you're going to do things my way. I'm not listening to your nonsense. And everyone falls in line because the man's presence. Obviously, R.A.P. to Mr. Postlethwaite did pass away in 2011 due to pancreatic cancer. Too young, only 64 years old, but definitely left behind a number of memorable character actor type performances, The Lost World included.
Yeah, I mean, you go back through his career, you will absolutely see just tons of performances that you've absolutely seen. Has a bit part in Inception, has a bit part in The Town, and those are movies that were like while he was actively dealing with his diagnosis, so he was still taking the time to perform and was still giving in great performances. But yeah, he's a very
an alum of
character.
the show for his performance in Alien 3.
Absolutely. He is this performance here is interesting because he's so laser focused. His only goal here is to hunt a Tyrannosaurus. That's literally the whole he doesn't even want a fee because he just wants to hunt a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Like that's literally all he wants. And ultimately it's very interesting because first off, he has like a shotgun that he's going to fight the T-Rex with. I always thought that was interesting where it's like, don't get me wrong. I know shotguns are not to be trifled with, but like, I feel like you'd want something a little heavier to face a Tyrannosaurus Rex, but ultimately they sedate it instead of killing it, and they're going to take it back to the island. But the carnage that Roland has seen is enough to make him want nothing more to do with this, which I just think is interesting. Basically, his best friend is somebody that ultimately succumbs to the dinosaurs, and it just turns him off completely from any further association with these dinosaurs and with this stuff. And I just thought that was a really interesting layer to add. And again, like captivity is just not something that this guy is interested in. He doesn't want to see animals in captivity. He wants to hunt them. And yeah, so a really interesting layered performance. One of our kind of B antagonists of the film, but ultimately a very memorable performance there.
Another member, though, of the good guy team with Dr. Ian Malcolm is Vince Vaughn as Nick Van Owen. This is the era of Vince Vaughn where he was still the same person as Jon Favreau, right? They're fast-talking, wise-ass characters. And it's young Vince Vaughn. I really don't know if there's much to say about this. I mean, not that it's bad or anything, but it's character survives the movie, but doesn't do anything too significant throughout, other than be kind of funny sometimes.
Well, it's interesting because he is this is early on his career. I mean, he does Rudy in '93. He does Swingers the year before this, which is kind of like, I mean, you could call it a breakout role, I guess, but that was one where people kind of saw what he was capable of in like a larger performance. And his role here is a little interesting. He's brought as originally a photographer to like document the whole trip, but it turns out that like if something went wrong, he was the contingency plan. Yeah, it's very strange. Like he set a backup plan just in case something went wrong, and it's like, who? And he's like, it was me. I was like, okay, what are you doing? What are you gonna do here? So he actually integrates in with the engine team pretty well. He's the one that ultimately steals Roland's ammo so that he can't kill the T-Rex. He has I like the line he says where he's like, one of the most magnificent creatures to ever walk the earth, and all you can do is kill it. Basically, like that's like he's just kind of calling out the irony and the ridiculousness of it. But yeah, so this is early on in Vince Vaughn's career. He's not quite busted out yet. That would clearly be in Gus Van Sant's Psycho the next year. I think that's what made everybody definitely notice Vince Vaughn. But yeah, it's a small performance here. Like his biggest thing is like he calls for the helicopter that saves them off the island. That's basically what he does. But yeah, he's here to occasionally quip, spit in Julianne Moore's hand because he misunderstood what she wanted. It's weird, very 90s stuff.
Vanessa Lee Chester plays Kelly Curtis, who's Ian Malcolm's daughter, which is weird because I don't think in that first movie he has kids. He mentions kids.
I think he mentions having kids. I feel like he does. Hold on. Let's go to the tape here, which makes
let's just pause this. Let's go watch Jurassic Park and come back.
I'm just trying to remember because I feel like he does. I think as he mentions he loves kids because I think he says he's got a bunch. I can't. Oh man, I'm mad.
Interesting
for this. Anyway,
pretty sure. Feel free to Google, figure it out yourself. But we obviously don't see his kids in that first movie, and now he has a daughter that he's taking care of. And there is a quick line to kind of explain things where he very meanly yells at her that, well, I didn't abandon you and run off to Paris, which is implying, I guess that's what the mom did, and that's horrible. Parents, don't do that. Don't trash talk the other parent to your child ever. It's not a good thing. But that's all just setting up. She's going to sneak onto the island with him. And now we have a young person that needs to be protected. I like how this character goes from, being very strong-willed and, sneaking onto this island and tries to make dinner for everybody, like really taking charge. But like once dinosaurs show up, it's kind of like everyone else is just terrified and scared out of her mind, totally understandably. But I think she makes that transition well. I like how the way she kind of stands up to her dad and puts him into place. But also the moments where a T-Rex sneaks into her tent and she is losing her mind. I think the two extremes that you need to be able to play in a Jurassic Park movie, she's hitting both of them.
I think so. I actually remember her from a movie I watched. I felt like I watched it a lot as a kid called Harriet the Spy. I remember because it had an orange VHS,
yes,
which I think was the only movie I ever saw that had an orange VHS, and then she was also in Alfonso Cuarón's '95 film A Little Princess, which, if you want to be emotionally devastated, check it out, folks.
Andrew, can I tell you something else about the Harriet the Spy VHS?
What?
Nick's first movie, you're right, orange VHS. The cover, the insert, if you take it out and flip it around, it is Harriet's journal.
Oh, that I did not know.
If you got it at home, go dig it out, flip it around.
The old cool. Arrow Video trick before Arrow Video was ever doing it.
Yeah.
They and it had the clamshell box too. I don't think it had like a cardboard sleeve or the standard plastic one. I think it was like a hard plastic.
Right. Yeah, it was like the Disney style. That's why you had the insert you could flip.
Yeah. Wow. Flashing back, folks. Because the way Arrow Video does it now is they'll do their new artwork, but then you can flip it around to the classic artwork for whatever the film is. So they do it both ways. But Harriet the Spy
video games
got there
do
first,
it a lot.
Folks.
They have like alternative covers if you flip them around.
Yeah, all the time. But so yeah, well, that was a fun little Harriet the Spy aside. but yeah,
I also watched that movie a lot growing up. I'll throw that out there. Yes.
I do like her performance here. She's doing a good job. Like you said, she's got to ride that line of like kind of innocent child, but then like in the thick of it has to still maintain that sense of. So you have to have both levels. You have to have like the being a kid, but then also like the terrified by the reality of the situation. And then she even gets a chance to gymnast kick a raptor, which is pretty rad. But because these support bars in these in this room are just carefully laid out like unparalleled bars. Perfect. I think she's doing a great job here. Still out there doing small things here and there, but by and large had the run as kind of a child and then kind of tapered off. But good stuff here.
We have Arliss Howard playing Peter Ludlow, Hammond's nephew, the obvious bad guy and stooge of this movie, who's there to get picked on and made fun of and not taken seriously by the other characters. And you hate this guy for the situations he puts people in, and he plays it all very well. Got a punchable face as he delivers his snobby lines and definitely gets what's coming to him by the end. And it's very satisfying when that happens. And you've got to give it up to Arliss for making that final moment as satisfying as it is.
Yeah, absolutely. He's so deeply unlikable in this film. He's the kind of prototypical greedy businessman who just sees the dollar signs, and he's acting like he doesn't have a choice. Like he's like, Ingen is bankrupt after what happened at the last island, so I have to do this.
Man, how unfortunate is that company name? I mean, it's spelled INGEN, but I don't like saying Ingen over and over again.
I don't. It's not very good. So he's because one of the other big changes in the Jurassic Park film is that the villain of the first Jurassic Park book is actually Dodgson, who you may all remember from the scene with Wayne Knight where he's like, Dodgson, we got Dodgson here. See, nobody cares. Like in the book, that guy is the main villain. And is just operating on that level. And Ludlow here he's in a similar vein. And he is just, you hate him. And when he dies, you're happy he dies. He's so, to that credit, shout out to Arliss Howard for making Peter Ludlow so deeply unlikable that I was happy to watch him die. Never going to be sad about that. And it's, karma, dude. Mess with dinosaurs, they mess back.
I think those are our key players. There's a few smaller performances I do want to shout out, and Andrew, if you got any, we can do that as well. But sure. Real quick, Peter Stormare plays Dieter Stark, who's on the team that's capturing the dinosaurs. And this dude is just a real bastard. I mean, you hate Arliss Howard, might hate this guy more. He needlessly shocks a tiny dinosaur just because he's just not a good guy. He's very good at playing not a good guy, an alum of our show. In Constantine, he played Lucifer. so the ultimate
The
bad
devil.
guy. And yeah, he's just got that face where you're like, that is a villain. And it's also very satisfying when those little dinosaurs get their revenge on this guy.
Yeah, he's got a very telling scene where he's sitting with one of those little tiny dinosaurs, and the weird Allman Brothers Leonard Skinner looking scientist there. He's explaining to him that, like, he's kind of shocked that the dinosaur isn't scared of humans, and Dwayne Allman over there is basically like, no, there's never been humans on this island. They've never had any contact with humans. They've got no reason to think we're like inherently dangerous, which I don't know if that's true. I feel like if a creature like 10 times my size walked up to me, I'd probably feel pretty threatened and would still leave. But I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not a chaos theorist or a biologist or a scientist, but just call it a hunch. But yeah, so he literally, Peter Stormare's character, takes like his taser and like zaps the thing and is like, well, now it does. And I was like, oh, bruh. There's so many sequences in this movie that are basically just watching these guys be cruel to animals. And it's genuinely uncomfortable at times just watching these people be the way they are. But Stormare is genuinely, I mean, he is you hate him. You're so happy. He's another guy that when the karma comes around, you are so happy to see it.
When the river runs red.
Yep. Because it literally does.
And I've got to give a shout out to Richard Schiff as Eddie Carr. Yeah. I love this guy. Again, alum of our show. We talked about him in Man of Steel, but another character actor with one of the most distinct voices I've ever heard. And that's the reason I recognized him. It took me a minute because I'm used to kind of seeing him now with his gray hair. I watch him on The Good Doctor, a show I've shouted out plenty of times on this show. It's one of the few like weekly dramas I follow every week, but he's very good on that show. Great here. But doesn't have the gray hair, so it took me a minute. But that voice was unmistakable. Very memorable death as he gets bitten in half by a pair of T-Rexes. Definitely a highlight of the movie. And again, going back to that voice, anybody that might be playing the new God of War Ragnarok, he is the voice of Odin himself. So,
well, that is something I'm going to have to check
casting.
Out. But yeah, he's a who's who. He's everywhere. He's been in almost every television show ever. The West Wing, obviously, he was on that for a long time as Toby Ziegler. He got an Emmy Award for that. I think he got a bunch of awards for it. He's been everywhere. Was recently actually just the U.S. Secretary of State in Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Brief performance, but never sad to see him on my screen. But yeah, he's been everywhere. And yeah, another person I forgot was in this movie that I kind of just glossed over. But yeah, never sad to see Richard Schiff on my screen. One other, I feel like we just have to shout out Richard Attenborough does return as Dr. John Hammond. Brief performance here. He's basically only seen at the beginning and the end. And at the end, it's really just an interview. Richard Attenborough is, he's a legend. There's really not much you can say about Richard Attenborough. Rest in peace. He did pass away in 2014. But just a huge career dating back to the 40s. I mean, through the 40s all the way up to 2002 was his last acting role. I think he did a narration, and then he actually directed a film in 2007. They did use him in they used some like archive stuff for some of the more recent Jurassic Park films, but so a huge career spanning 7 decades. And he lived to be 90. I mean, that's a really, really good run. But, it's interesting to see his kind of evolution, because in the first one, he very much is, he's presenting it as this noble notion that he's going to create this way to glimpse back into the past. And it's Ian Malcolm that actually kind of sees through it and is just like, he's like, you can dress it up however you want. This is still money. It's all about, like you said, you slapped it on a lunchbox before you even knew what you had. And it's it's one of those things that you think about because you're just like, oh wow, we've invented the technology to literally bring dead species back from extinction, and we use it for a theme park. Like it's like we've just had such a tremendously huge scientific breakthrough that could change the course of humanity, and we're using it to make, the cheapest kind of money possible. Not even like whatever, but we'll talk about it later, but there's later developments in these films that people were like, why would you do that? And I'm like, money. Like it's always about money, guys, especially in Jurassic Park. The villains are evil CEOs. It's not hard to track. But he has that switch now. He kind of gets it. He sees that he's like, these just need to be left alone. He's like got his information on them and what they're doing, and he's like they will survive without us, and they need to survive without us. And so to see his evolution as a character was nice. And yeah, it was just a fun little performance. The idea here seems to be that he is sick in some way, and that he does not have long, but he does get to see the island mostly left alone by the end of this film, even if it doesn't stay that way forever.
They gotta make more movies. But Andrew, I think it's time to talk about this movie, specifically our favorite scenes and best scenes of the film. So in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is your favorite scene in The Lost World, Jurassic Park? Can we talk about how weird this title is, by the way? The Lost World, Jurassic Park. If you were to file all of your, physical DVDs, Blu-rays, or whatever onto a shelf, this one wouldn't be alongside all the other movies, and that would drive me nuts.
They actually, it's always why I know that when a movie is subtitled, but like even then, when you start subtitling movies, they can still end up out of order, and that's what always drives me nuts about it. Because Jurassic Park, at least they'll be
together.
They will. Because like Jurassic Park 6 is Jurassic Park Dominion, but Jurassic Park 5 is Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. So it technically is alphabetically after Dominion. Folks, just number them. It's fine. We're not going to care. But yeah, it's a very strange title because it invokes comparisons to Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World, which is kind of, and I think Spielberg even said that like he told David Koepp that like that was the he told him to watch that. He was like focus on that, and then Koepp did obviously read The Lost World, but yeah, it's again you kind of interestingly see that like they Crichton wrote a novel. It's almost like the novel and the movie were two like independent things that were developed completely separately and just kind of were like both due to demand for more. Like people were like, oh, Michael Crichton should write another book. Oh, they should make another movie. And then they did both, and it was like nobody talked to anybody while they were doing either one. But yeah, it creates for a very strange title.
Weird title. Should be Jurassic Park: The Lost World. #PP. But Andrew, what is your favorite scene in this movie?
There's a couple of scenes where you really get reminded that Spielberg is pretty good at this. It was like I just recently, I saw Avatar, The Way of the Water, opening night, and it's James Cameron. But like there's sequences where like it devolves into just action. And I'm watching this and I'm like, man, you forget that James Cameron is really good at that sometimes. Like you think about all the action movies he's made, and I was just like just straight up when it just gets to certain things, I was like, God, I bet this dude could knock out like a live action movie or a live action, space action film in his backyard in like a month, and it would be better than most action films that come out today just because it seems like instinct. And Spielberg has a lot of that same stuff where like it just the sense of scale and then the action, and it all comes through really well. What I'm gonna go with is I'm actually gonna go with the T-Rex attack, basically. There's a couple of scenes, but this is the one I'm gonna go with because it's when I was really sucked in the most. There's tension, there's dinosaurs, there's action, there's pretty much all the stuff that you come to suspect from these films. You could you could argue that it's kind of a rehash or a slower or a smaller scale version of the T-Rex attack from the first film, but that's mean. Don't say that. But basically our setup here is that Jeff Goldblum and his team have basically gone into InGen's camp and released all the dinosaurs that they captured, including a T-Rex child that they had captured with the intention of luring out the adult T-Rex. And
so mean.
It's so mean, folks. Be nice to your fake dinosaurs. But you got a Tamagotchi, be nice to it. Don't be these people. So they bring it back to their camp because it's hurt. And so they're trying to heal it. But naturally, the T-Rex parents don't care that it's hurt. They don't care that they're trying to heal it. Their paternal instincts have jumped in, and they are just trying to rescue their child. And this leads to, obviously, the tension as we're kind of going back and forth. And then we have kind of that moment where we see through the trees that the T-Rex is coming. And we're trying to get them out there and let them know. And then obviously the T-Rexes attack these kind of weird RV type things that they've got, very strange kind of science lab RV type things they've got, and all sponsored by Mercedes, because that logo is prominent on the front of everything.
Something that actually recurs throughout these movies. We'll be talking about that some more later.
But hey, you got to offset that budget somehow. But yeah, so this leads to them giving the child back, but then the T-Rexes attack. They start shoving the trailers over the cliff down to the rocks below, which maybe don't park so close to the cliffs next time. I feel like that was an avoidable
asking to be pushed
situation.
over.
Yeah, there's T-Rexes here, but yeah, and so this obviously one of the trailers falls over. They kind of fall down. Julianne Moore lands on the plate glass at the bottom. You get that big tense sequence where the glass is slowly cracking, and they're trying to get to her in time. All the while, Richard Schiff's character is trying to stop them from falling over and trying to save them. Just a really thrilling action rescue type sequence, like you said, where unfortunately by the end of it, Richard Schiff's character gets killed by 2 T-Rexes. It's pretty brutal. It's one of those deaths where you're just oh,
you hear the bone snap.
Yeah, did we have to? Did it have to be this brutal? Which is also something that recurs throughout this series. But it's dinosaurs. There's no mercy. But ultimately, the weird resolution to the end of this is that the other team shows up and kind of saves them. And this leads to their kind of tenuous working relationship during the rest of the island sequences. But I think this is all working for me. You got the T-Rexes front and center. You got them it's confirming again that there is a parental instinct in the Tyrannosaurus Rex, which is a thing that Julianne Moore's character brings up throughout the film. And I dig it. It's all good for me.
It's very funny. You mentioned earlier how our knowledge of dinosaurs comes from this movie, and I watched the movie. I'm oh yeah, so T-Rexes do have maternal instinct. It's proven in this film.
This movie explains it.
They can just make the truth of that whatever they want. Really, it's funny. I've learned from these movies that their vision is based on movement. If you come across a T-Rex, don't move, don't make a sound. I know that. I will never use that. But I know that's ingrained in my brain how to survive a T-Rex attack. Andrew, I come across a mountain lion or a bear. Do I play dead? Do I make myself big? Do I make noise? I don't know, and I will never remember it. But a T-Rex, I'm prepared.
Yep, I know exactly what to do.
I agree with you 100%. This is also my favorite scene of the movie. And I had a feeling it would be going in and watching this movie again for the first time in over 20 years. It was confirmed. Definitely my favorite scene in the movie. I think just flat out the best and the best scene of the movie, and the best written and shot and made and all that good stuff. And the reason I thought it would be my favorite scene is because I saw this movie a few times as a kid. I don't know if I saw it in theaters, but I definitely rented it and watched it a couple times and never watched it again, right? But I remembered exactly 3 things from this movie. I forgot most of it, including the casting and stuff we're talking about. But I remember the little girl on the beach getting attacked by the dinosaurs in the beginning. I remembered Julianne Moore on that plate of glass as the spider cracks start forming and how terrifying that is. And then I remember using gymnastics to defeat a velociraptor.
Yep.
That's it. That's the only things I remembered about this movie. And yeah, I just remember the scene being really intense. And yeah, talk about like, Spielberg still knows how to do it. The way that the scene continuously introduces a problem, and then a solution, and then a problem, and then a solution over and over again, just get you so invested, right? And they're getting pushed over the edge, and Julianne Moore's character falls, but boom, there's glass there. She's saved. But the glass is breaking. So the other guy's got to climb down to her. The glass breaks. Lucky backpack. She grabs that and she's saved. Richard Schiff's character shows up and throws him down a rope. Boom, they got a rope. But the caravan is still falling off the edge. And so he gets his truck with the winch on it, and he's running up to attach the winch to the van, but boom, the cord is too short. So he's got to drive the truck forward. And over again, the stuff keeps happening up until his character getting killed before they're fully saved. And then the bus falls and they're holding on to the rope. Like it's just fantastic. It's just so well done. It's thrilling every time. It's this movie's version of the T-Rex attack from the first one. Like I said, it's kind of a redux because it's involving a T-Rex again. But Andrew, there's 3 T-Rexes this time technically versus 1 from the first one. So that's different enough for me to let it slide. T-Rex is objectively the coolest dinosaur. So let's let them have it. Let's let them have their time in the sun again. And yeah, I agree with you. There's the tension is great. It's great Spielberg filmmaking at its finest, and works for me 100%, totally every time.
Yeah, I'm glad we agree, Chris. It's nice to have that happen occasionally
on something.
It doesn't happen a lot, folks. But yeah, it's just a great sequence, and yeah, it feels a little bit more unique to this film, whereas I think the raptor stuff starts to feel a little bit too familiar for me at times. Not that that's a bad thing, but yeah, great sequence. Good call.
I don't usually do this, but I have a second favorite scene of the movie. And I was considering it for my favorite, but I've got to go with the sequence we went with as a favorite because it's just so undeniable. But I think if we do have a criticism of our favorite scene, it's that it's a little reminiscent of the first movie. But a scene that stood out to me as being totally different from the first movie and taking the series in a new direction is whenever the team that's there to capture the dinosaurs first arrives and they're hunting down the dinosaurs in those fields. Because that's something you don't see in the first movie. Yeah, the humans, they have equipment, they have weapons, they have these vehicles with the seats that slide out so they can get a clear shot. They have these nets. Didn't have any of that in the first movie. So like hunting down dinosaurs, it's sad. But it's something new for the series, and so I think it's very smart to get that sequence in here. And I think it's also very well done. Again, I like that our big game hunter has this line as he's kind of taking control of the situation. He says, "I've been on too many safaris with rich dentists to listen to any more suicidal ideas. Right? We're gonna do what I say." And Andrew, how interesting is it that we associate dentists specifically so much with big game hunting? Like this is before that
Cecil the lion
was ever killed, right? But it's just what's the deal with dentists and wanting to go kill animals? Leave them alone, dentists.
Yeah, come on, guys. I know your dentist's teeth are annoying, but like, good Lord. I get it. I deal with my teeth all the time, and it ain't fun. But leave animals alone. Fill the void. Alone. Feel the incessant existential void in your life some other way. Read. Like, you can do that at home. You don't have to spend $10,000 to go read. There's so many things in this world that you can experience the wonder of existence and this planet. That you don't have to kill other things. And be better, folks.
Yeah, read a book, dentists. But I like the scene a lot. So one note I took is that this is the first time in the series that we get dirt bikes running alongside the dinosaurs, which kind of becomes like an iconic thing from Jurassic World and on. But it happens here first. and it's just as cool. They ride it like underneath the dinosaur's legs and stuff. Looks great. I think this movie holds up visually about as well as that first one. The first one being more impressive because it's obviously older, but I think we're still holding up. You can kind of see where it's a little bit dated CGI at times, but also it's more ambitious because we have a lot more daylight action scenes, whereas the key action scenes of the first one are at nighttime in the rain where you can kind of hide your CG a little bit. So a little bit more ambitious, but still totally holds up. I'm never taken out by the CG, taken out of the movie by the CG dinosaurs. One sequence I particularly like here is whenever the Leonard Skinner guy you were talking about, who knows a thing or two about dinosaurs, he's explaining to someone the dinosaur that they're trying to capture that's got like the hard head, like it rams things, and how like the neck attaches at a different spot so we can lower its head and the neck aligns and it's more powerful. And as he's explaining it in the background, the dinosaur rams a car door and the guy flies out the other side of the car. Very, very fun little visual and foreground, background play there. But it's a great sequence, and I want to shout it out because it's so unique to The Lost World. It's not something you could have seen in that first movie. So, again, very smart they did that.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the dirt bikes or motorcycles, whatever you want to call them. Is Spielberg actually told them to not include a scene where they were going to use motorcycles to flee the raptors, because there actually is a sequence like that in the novel, but he cut it. But then, like you said, ultimately through the Jurassic World series, especially, the idea of riding motorcycles while working with or fleeing from dinosaurs becomes arguably a pretty iconic part of it. And so it's tasted here, but it could have gone a lot harder. And Spielberg actually said he did regret not including that. But yeah, this is, like you said, you talk about sequences that are unique to this film. That really is. It's this, and you could say the same for the climax too, which we'll talk about in a bit. But yeah, I do like this a lot. You get a lot of introductions to these characters, and like I said, a lot of these characters really aren't very fleshed out. I'm probably making the Leonard Skinner scientist way more interesting than I'm probably making him sound way more interesting than the movie actually makes him. But
genuinely, the reason he has that hat and like long red hair is to make him stand out. Like that's
right.
So he doesn't look like everyone else.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a visual identifier. So and it works. Like you said, good for you, Greg Allman. But I'm just gonna keep cycling through members of both of these bands until I run out. Which I won't, because there's 97 people in Leonard Skinner. But but yeah, this one is really, really good. I like it a lot. But again, and I remember like some of these vehicles were like toys. Like the seats that slid out. I remember some of the toys having the things that did that, or they had the seats that were like on the outside of the car so that you could do that. And I definitely remember a lot of the merchandising for this film. I'm pretty sure I saw this in theaters. I would have been 10 when this came out, so I think it would have been right up my alley. I am not sure if I saw Jurassic Park because I was only 6. And I don't know if my parents thought I was ready for Jurassic Park. But would
have been terrifying. I definitely had a lot of the merchandise growing up, mostly because of my brother is 4 years older than me, so it was a little bit more in the Jurassic Park like target for kids getting falling in love with dinosaurs. But he had the toys, he had the T-Rex. They all had like the JP logo on it, the official Jurassic Park dinosaurs. Yeah. I remember, I think it was the T-Rex, but one of the dinosaurs had like a chunk of skin you could take out the side so you could see the ribs. And we lost T-Rex, the chunk that comes out, so we just always had exposed meat. We had a Jurassic Park board game that we never actually played, but you could like set up all the facilities on the island like on the board, so we would just do that and like play with it with action figures. But yeah, Jurassic Park merchandise, dinosaur action figures. Yes, action figures. Yeah. Andrew,
sorry, I just had to call that out.
Yeah, I would never call you out for mispronouncing something, but thanks.
It's a bit of a controversy if you ask me. But yeah, I do like when they first get to the island as well, because like I said, this movie shotguns them getting to the island very quickly. I think we're back on the island within 10 or 15 minutes, if that. But I do love when they appear, because the whole first movie builds to that dinosaur reveal. It's like a
Yeah.
huge, huge reveal of that film. Because the intro with the raptor, it's like very hidden. It's very, it's very, it's very smart filmmaking because it tells you there's something very dangerous here, but you don't get to see it yet. That big reveal of the brontosaurus is just, it's still like, it hits me. Like I was watching it in the theater and like you just see it and I was just like, man, just tremendous. But
Can I tell you something about that first scene though? With
Sure.
the raptor, the first movie. My aforementioned older brother is 4 years older than me. He thought that the raptor in that first scene was named Shuta. And whenever the man was yelling Shuta, he was yelling the raptor's name.
Oh man. Oh.
So I always think of that. The raptor Shuta. Shooter McGavin, the
Shooter.
raptor.
Shooter McGavin, the raptor. The innocence of youth. Yeah. So anyway, we get back to the dinosaur island real fast this time. And they're running through and they're screaming out for Sarah, which you feel like they'd know better than to do. But at one point, Vince Vaughn yells her full name. Like he goes, Sarah Harding! And Jeff Goldblum is just like, how many Sarahs do you think are on this island? Like the wrong one shows
really
up.
Like that, yeah.
They kind of do it again later where they're looking for Nick and somebody goes, Nick Van Owen. And it's like, again, wait. I don't think there's any other Nicks on this island. But yeah.
I do like that line
we're talking about.
Yeah, I want to talk about the humor of this movie because jokes like that are peppered throughout. And look, hashtag positivity podcast. I think there's a bit of a tone issue with this movie, whereas it's darker than the first movie. It's more violent. It really pushes that PG-13 at times. It's a lot more dire situations at times with less levity because there's less of that family dynamic in that first one. There's some of it with Malcolm's daughter, but just overall less of it. And it's undercut with those jokes. Like the joke you're just talking about. They arrive at the island. They find her abandoned backpack. She could be dead, but he takes the time to be like, how many Sarahs do you think are on the island? And it is funny. Like I want to give the movie credit.
Right.
That line is funny, but the fact they're making jokes at this time, like our favorite scene with the buses, they ask Richard Schiff for a rope. They are hanging on for dear life. And he says, is there anything else I can get you? And all three of them make a joke because Ian Malcolm says, yeah, 3 double cheeseburgers with everything. And then Vince Vaughn chimes in, no onions on mine. And then Julianne Moore, an apple turnover. They're all
apple
hanging.
Turnover. Yep.
They're over the edge of a cliff about to die making these fast food jokes, waiting for a rope to come save them. So I think they're in the script as a way to like save the movie from being too dark because like it says, it does push that envelope a little bit. But it can also give you a little bit of whiplash with the humor. My favorite joke, and it's not even really a joke, but it's just insanely funny delivery by Jeff Goldblum, is in the last sequence of the movie whenever they are trying to lure the T-Rex back to the ship with the baby T-Rex. And they go and they grab the baby T-Rex, they put it in the car, and Ian Malcolm says, when the adult sees us again with its baby, isn't it gonna be like you? Because they have their T-Rex again. But that just something the idea him impersonating a T-Rex with you was very funny to me.
Yeah, like you said, the humor is interesting. The cheeseburger joke, it got me. I'm not gonna lie. Like I was sitting watching this, and they were just like 3 cheeseburgers with everything on them, and it's like then they're like, and I mean like, it's that thing where like you tell yourself that in a moment of crisis you wouldn't lose your sense of humor, and I'm like, no, I probably would. I feel like if I were facing down death, my stunning wit and tremendous sense of humor would be gone immediately. But
yeah, get a rope. Anything else? Just get the fucking rope.
For the love of God.
Another fun joke. It's a bit of a blink and you miss it. Is in the city sequence at the end, they crash through a Blockbuster or video rental store.
Yeah.
And there's a big ad for an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie called William Shakespeare's King Lear. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger front and center.
There's also one for it's a Tom Hanks like Tsunami Sunrise. And
is there another fake movie? Because I saw Robin Williams in Jack, which is a real movie. So they were like mixed in with them. But I didn't see a.
But it's apparently a sequel. It's apparently a sequel to Jack called Jack and the Beanstalks.
It wasn't even okay.
So there's Arnold and King
Lear.
All fake. They're all fake, and then it's Tom Hanks in something called Tsunami Sunrise, and like those are just so funny to me because they're just like you said, they're blink and you miss it, but like they clearly paid like a real artist to like draw these and do it and make it a thing. But it's pretty funny. That just reminds me of just Last Action Hero, where there's that whole sequence where the kid like reimagines Hamlet starring Arnold. And it's arguably the scene of that movie that I just remember the most, even as an adult. Just, something is rotten in the state of Denmark, and Hamlet is taking out the trash.
See, I also thought of Last Action Hero, but I thought of when they're in the video rental store,
right,
and there's a big standee for Terminator 2 starring Sylvester Stallone.
Yes, same idea, same energy.
A movie we will likely talk about later this year. You mentioned the Mercedes advertising. There had to be some like Sega money coming their way to get that Sega line in there that I used in the beginning because his daughter doesn't want to stay with someone because she doesn't even have a Sega. No console name, just a Sega. Guys, this is 1997. Sega has lost its goodwill at this point. This is the Sega Saturn flop. The Sega 32X was a nightmare. This is before the Dreamcast, which was like their last bit of goodwill. This was a real low point for that company. So the most unrealistic part of this movie is that in 1997, a child is asking for a Sega.
Well, maybe they just really liked the back catalog of the Genesis, man. Don't judge. We could be looking at somebody who's just in an auteur of the classics.
A bit of a stretch, but I'll allow it.
Reed Richards wouldn't stretch that hard, but I wonder if that was I'm just curious if like there was a Sega game that was made in like conjunction with the film.
That might be right. That might be right. Good call. Let's talk a little bit about that final sequence, though. A T-Rex loose in the city. Again, kind of promised by the advertising. It's a classic Jason Takes Manhattan situation where you're selling the movie on this very specific idea of a monster in a city, but it doesn't happen until the final few minutes, and you don't get nearly enough of it as you thought from the advertising.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely like I said, this is where I feel like the movie is just King Kong. I mean, it's the idea. I mean, it doesn't happen like during a show where he breaks out, but it's just bringing it back to the island. But yeah, it's definitely a. I mean, it's still well put together. I don't want to act like it's not, but there's definitely.
I mean, sure. Hashtag Pod to Be Podcast. I do like the sequences that we do get. I really like. It's a very Spielberg moment. A hallmark of Spielberg is always capturing the reaction to the fantastical thing rather than just focusing on the big thing. But like he's known for like these close-up shots of actors reacting, screaming or laughing or whatever it may be. There's plenty of like push-ins on an actor's face screaming. I mean,
you think of the first film. That reaction to the Brontosaurus is just as equally like Sam Neill like stumbling up to his feet and pulling his sunglasses off just as much as it's the reveal of the Brontosaurus. Like people meme 100%. That reaction of Sam Neill to have him reacting to anything now.
Turning Laura Dern's head so she can see it too.
Just that same idea of just not just like you said, not just what is it, but how are people reacting to it? It's and it's important. I don't want to undersell that, but there's a lot of it in this final sequence.
Yeah, in the city, we're introduced to this family. First to this young boy who sees a dinosaur in the backyard, and he goes to his parents' bedroom and he wakes them up and he's like, there's a dinosaur in our backyard. And they are begrudgingly getting out of bed and arguing about why he's awake in the middle of the night. What's keeping him up? Is it the fish tank in his room? They just totally ignore what he's saying and assume that's a dream or whatever until they all look out the window of his bedroom and we get that great reaction shot. And then we see the T-Rex with a dog house hanging out of his mouth. The chain that presumably was attached to the dog is going into his teeth, and then he bites down and the doghouse falls. A bit sad. I'm glad we didn't see the dog, but ultimately I think a pretty funny visual. The funny way is a weird thing to say. A funny way to show that a dog has been killed. But again, it's about, if you just see the T-Rex storm into the backyard and eat a dog, that's not too interesting. But having this quick side story with the family and their reaction, it makes it that much more memorable and that much more Spielberg.
Yeah, it makes it hit a little bit more than it otherwise would have, just showing it the other way. Also, that T-Rex drinking pool water. Yeah.
The T-Rex will eat dogs. He will drink pool water, but he will apparently not eat hands. On that ship, there's like the hand holding the
Okay, can I talk
wheel.
about this, Chris? Can I talk about this? Because I have so many questions about this sequence. Hashtag PP. I want to set that this whole thing. What killed those people?
You see, Andrew, a T-Rex can dislocate all the bones of its body and slither through the halls of a ship and get to the captain's room.
How? No. So this is a question that I have literally had even since watching, because even as a kid, I feel like in my brain I was like, oh, like the T-Rex got out, killed everybody, and then they like forced it back in before they died. Like that was like my weird brain's reconciling of what happened here. And it's only like watching it as an adult where I was like, no, the T-Rex didn't get out. Something else killed them. And at no point is this ever mentioned. At no point is this ever explained. At no point does what happened to the people on this boat. But like, it couldn't have been the T-Rex. But
they say that's
the
only dinosaur on the ship. They say that multiple times. The only dinosaur is the T-Rex.
It doesn't make any sense. Like, it still doesn't work. Like, it's still like, they can say it all they want. It doesn't change the fact that how did the T-Rex get back in there?
How did it navigate a ship to get to the captain's room? Like, how did it? Yeah, I don't know, Andrew. You're watching the movie wrong.
The implication, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, is that something else attacked them and just isn't there anymore. Like either it was like airbound dinosaurs or something else attacked them and then just like left after everybody was dead. But like the movie
is that what it's
powers right past it. Like I don't think it's going for anything. I think the implication is everybody on this boat's dead, deal with it. But it's genuinely like it baffles me now where I'm just like, who killed these people or what killed these people? Because the movie never explains it.
Maybe it's like the shaving cream moment from the first movie where they focus on it getting buried and they're like, oh, this is going to lead to something. And then it never does. Maybe they wanted to have a hanging thread of like, what else was on that ship that could have killed them? Did it make it to the mainland? And then they never follow up on it. Andrew, I don't know. It is a great question though.
Yeah, it's interesting, but it's also just one of those things where, the shaving cream can, no spoilers, does sort of come back. But
I'm assuming that's a movie I haven't seen yet, so hold on to the spoilers.
You'll find out in a few weeks' time. But it's but I agree, but it's very much in that same note because that's like something. Because like I said, in the original book, Dodson is the villain. Like he recurs through the whole thing. I also love in that sequence where he takes out the piece of shaving cream and then puts it on somebody else's pie. Like just what a rude thing to do. It's like, oh, you think that's whipped cream? It's not. But and yeah, I do want to shout out people. You really should read Jurassic Park, the book. You got a lot of bones that are the same, pun intended, but sorry. There's a lot of similar DNA there, better. But it's really its own thing. The fate of a lot of the characters is different. There's a lot of different other characters that get cut from the movie, or they get kind of combined into multiple characters. But it really is worth reading. I think it's a really
I have read the
tremendously good book.
beginning of the book multiple times, at least 3 times, and I never finish it. I don't know. I read plenty of Michael Crichton. I read a lot of Michael Crichton in high school, but that one I couldn't, probably because it was different from the movie, and that's what I wanted. I don't know, but if you're recommending, maybe I'll have to give that one another shot. Maybe I'll jump back into that and try to get past it. I remember in the beginning they talk about out here on the dig site, we measure time in cases of beer. Like I remember that very clearly because it's early in the book, which I read again multiple times, but never finished it. So I'm gonna have to give that one a shot, Andrew.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth reading. Like I said, I know there's a hesitation of just like, oh well, I saw the movie and it's going to be mostly the same. But Jurassic Park, I think, is an instance where there is enough departure that it'll be a different experience. But yeah, maybe Dodgson comes back. You don't know what awaits you, Chris. You have no idea what's down this hallway. You'll find out.
I can't wait.
But yeah, otherwise, the final sequence is, like you said, you get a T-Rex rampaging through the city. And it's kind of, like you said, the movie kind of predicates itself on that. But it is interesting because it's so little of the movie. This is genuinely like the last 10 minutes. And it feels pretty detached from the rest of it in a lot of ways. Because what this movie essentially does is it just reveals information from the first one was not entirely true. So like obviously the biggest reveal being, oh, there was another island. And then the reveal that comes later by Ludlow is that, oh, well, he actually was going to put the island on the mainland and then stopped and decided to make it an island. But now there's an unfinished like amphitheater in San Diego that's just waiting for us to finish. And he's saying literally it could be finished in like a month. So all I'm saying is that it sounds like InGen's business decisions weren't the best going into all of this, apparently. So
hot take.
But yeah, so like we get this amphitheater that's kind of unfinished, and then we get our rampage through the city. But it is like you said, it's a thrilling sequence. Spielberg makes it very memorable. But it is such a small part of the film that you do got to wonder if some people felt misled. Perhaps.
Yeah, I did enjoy the movie more than I remembered, more than I anticipated. I liked a lot of the action scenes that we highlighted. I mean, it's a recurring thing throughout this month is probably going to be that it's unfair to compare these movies solely as how does it stack up against that first movie, because that first movie is perfect. Like you said, lightning in a bottle. It's been hard to catch it again. But I think if like a criticism that some people have in movies is that like the quote unquote monster, whatever it is, you don't get enough of it. And I think Jurassic Park finds a pretty good balance of teasing the monsters before finally giving them to you. I think you do get a lot of them. But if by chance your complaint was I wanted more dinosaurs, more dinosaur action, The Lost World's delivering in spades. And I think just about all of those sequences totally work.
I agree.
Dinosaurs are cool. Can confirm. Can't deny it. It's fun. This is gonna be a fun month. Fun way to kick off 2023.
Indeed. Love dinosaurs, man.
Dinosaurs. Plenty of more dino talk coming out throughout the rest of this month as we go through all of these Jurassic Park sequels. But right now, it's time for our question of the week. If you want to leave us a question for a future episode, you can do so in our Discord. There is a link in the show notes. Go and join our little community there and check out the Questions of the Week channel where you can leave a question like this one here from Breaker. Here's what they have to say. I have a fun discussion topic. After watching The Simpsons Meet Loki thing on Disney Plus, what characters could lift Thor's hammer, besides the obvious Marvel people who can?
Well,
Great question.
it is a great question. I'll go with some obvious answers first, just simply because they actually have lifted it. But Superman has lifted it, as has Wonder Woman. Both within the confines, obviously, of various crossovers.
That's fun.
Yeah, I don't know why
Superman
Superman needs it. But
No, but it makes total sense that he would be worthy for sure.
Right. Well, it's actually interesting because the concept that they introduce, it's JLA Avengers where Superman lifts it, and it's DC versus Marvel where Wonder Woman lifts it, and Wonder Woman gets like her worst costume ever after lifting it. Superman gets no costume change after he lifts it. Wonder Woman gets this whole costume inspired by Thor's look at the time, and it's just Google it for yourself, folks. It's rough, but Superman is able to lift it during the events of JLA Avengers. He is unable to lift it after them. So it introduces the concept that like you can be worthy in the moment, and then if it's not necessary, you can then not be worthy. So it introduced, they played with that with Thor, where he's done things to be unworthy, but JLA Avengers introduced that concept that circumstances can make you worthy. And then the absence of those circumstances can then in turn return you to unworthy status. But obviously that's not the heart of this question. He's not asking for people that have lifted it. They're asking for people that have not, that we think could.
You just want to flex your comic book knowledge. I get it. I did not know that, though, about Wonder Woman and Superman, but cool picks. I don't think...
The iconic cover for JLA Avengers Thor, or JLA Avengers 4, is Superman holding Captain America's shield and Thor's hammer. Again, you don't need either of those, bro. But especially the shield. But yeah, it's a very iconic image that can't deny.
Yeah, that's good. I don't think Batman would be worthy. He's my guy. I love him and all, but not quite hitting all the checklist, if you will, of what you would need. Great question. First one that comes to mind, Jesus Christ. He could probably lift it. Pretty selfless, good guy.
Yeah, but there's a multi-gods question there that I don't know if we're going to dive
That's
into.
true. I mean, his dad really doesn't like acknowledging other gods, so that might
run into some trouble there. But
any biblical historians wants to give us write an essay on what would happen if Jesus lifted that hammer. I would love to read it. But I think Steve Irwin could have lifted it.
Bob Ross.
Yeah, your classics there.
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers for sure. Of those three we just named, I think Mr. Rogers is the one that I would bet the most
Carl
money
Sagan,
on.
probably.
Who's Carl Sagan?
Cosmos, the original Cosmos. He just wanted you to learn all about the universe and science and stuff. He was like Bill Nye, but not quite as approachable for children.
Gotcha.
Or I say again, like if we're looking at fictional characters, my brain just kind of goes to comic book characters. But a lot of those, they've answered that question already in a variety of ways. But
it's interesting because
real people I can definitely think of too. Yeah,
most like when you're writing an interesting character, you have a tendency to make them a flawed character because that just leads to conflict and interesting and overcoming stuff. So a lot of people I'm thinking of are going to get, knocked out of contention because they have some issues that are going to stop them from being worthy.
Optimus Prime, he could definitely lift it.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good call.
If we're talking sacrifice, Transformers, the movie. Yeah. Definitely going with that. About Neo from The Matrix.
Okay. Is he lifting it in the real world? Because in the Matrix, lifting it's not really a big deal because he can kind of rewrite stuff. But yeah, so you think real world Neo could lift Thor's hammer?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, good call.
Samurai Jack, probably.
What list are you looking at? These are some... I can't argue with it. Did you look up most wholesome or worthy people?
Yeah, basically. Kirby could just eat it. Do you get the powers of the hammer by eating it? Yeah, I mean, you talk sacrifice. My brain goes to Barry Allen because he has that big sacrifice at the end of Crisis on Infinite Earths, or not even at the end; it's in the middle. But he sacrifices himself to save the multiverse. So I definitely think Barry Allen would be worthy of lifting the hammer. Doesn't need to particularly because he moves faster than people can think. But I definitely think we're talking sacrifice. There's that. I don't know. It's probably somebody in Lord of the Rings could have lifted it. Aragorn or somebody.
I thought of that, but like I don't know that lore enough to really say who. But yeah, sure.
Well, I know like Sean Bean's character, Sean Bean's character is kind of flawed. I feel like he fits more into like the Batman category where it's like ultimately a noble character, but flawed enough that they would be excluded. But maybe like Aragorn or Legolas or somebody. But
in our Discord, Breaker did give a few examples of people they were thinking of. They think Wall-E might be able to lift Thor's hammer.
I think so.
Good out of the box answer. I wouldn't have thought of that. Also, Santa Claus could lift Thor's hammer.
Yeah, I think so.
That is a fun comic waiting to happen, or movie or crossover or something.
Well, folks, if you haven't seen Violent Night starring David Harbour, check it out. I'm not going to say that he lifts Thor's hammer, but you'll probably leave satisfied. Yeah, it's a fun question though, especially when you like force yourself to think outside of like comics. Because comics, it's so easy to just be like, oh, well, this person's worthy and this person's worthy, and they'd definitely be able to lift it. But like, yeah, you can go to some strange places with that one.
I think Simba by the end of the movie could lift that.
What
thing.
List are you looking at?
No,
Simba. Simba's probably true.
I'm thinking of way more characters than I'm saying out loud because they're all, to be worthy. I mean, it's a pretty high bar. And like I said, a lot of characters, have their faults and have their issues. And I thought of like both James Bond or Ethan Hunt from the Mission Impossible series, but like they're assassins. I mean, there's a lot of the gray in what they do where I don't think they're gonna quite be worthy. But it's hard to think of like that pure character that at least always tries to do the good thing.
Kung Fu Panda.
That's the ultimate answer. That's the final answer. Kung Fu Panda could lift Thor's hammer. What's coming to mind for you? Are you thinking of a character right now that you think is worthy of lifting Thor's hammer? And Andrew and I can't think of it. Let us know. Hop into that Discord. There's a discussion going on the topic right now at the time of this recording. But if you've got a good answer, jump in there and let us know, or hit us up on social media. We'll be sure to check it out. And come back next week for some more Dino talk. And until then, just remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. You can check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. It's the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.